First speaker on the list is Brad, who's over here in the corner sleeping. We're starting talking about the railroads of the Roddis Lumber and Veneer Company of Park Falls, railroad operations from 1903 to 1938. The Roddis Company was founded up here in 1903, and well, no, I'm sorry.
Marshfield, actually.
Of their, but this was their main. These were where their main lands were, and their main. But Brad's going to tell you all about it. So.
Well, Sarah, thank you for inviting me to come and give another presentation. And I thought, well, what can I talk about? And I thought I'd do some book research on this particular area for railroad history. And normally I go out when I make a write-up of railroad history. I usually go out into the woods and follow the old rail beds and see what I can find. But in this situation, it's pretty much all by the book and by letter and by maps. So, yeah, Roddis Lumber and Veneer Company. Well, it started out in 1894 with William Roddis. He come to Marshfield and he put in $5,000 investment in the Hatteberg Veneer Company, and began to corner the market in mostly cheese boxes. And he had most of his wood sources coming from Wood County, but it come to a time when timber was getting exhausted, so he started buying up land up here in Park Falls, up in Iron County and Ashland County. And with these lands, it had enough timber for his veneer, but then there was a lot of other timber that wasn't veneer quality, like white pine and aspen, spruce. So he thought in 1903 he built a sawmill up here. And the railroad at the time was the Wisconsin Central, which was later called the Sioux Line, was already established along with the Chicago Northwestern Railway. And from 1904 on, he built his own private railroad with the help of the Sioux Line, which built the first 10 miles of line. And as we could see, here is a portion of a 1938 aerial photograph, and the yellow line indicates Roddis's railroad, and you'll see where the Roddis mill is located and where the Hines mill is located. And this Roddis line followed up along the west side of the North Fork of the Flambeau River. And the Sioux Line built the first 10 miles of track, and then after that, Roddis continued to build up track, but he was using the rails furnished by the Sioux Line. And this went on until 1938, and then all the rail that was used was taken back to the Sioux Line. And it was a total of about 56 miles of track, including tracks in the mill yard. This is a map that I've got offline. This is from the James P. Cain collection. And James P. Cain was a civil engineer for the Milwaukee Road, and as a hobby he took up drawing all the old railroad corridors of all of Wisconsin on these Geological Survey topographical maps. Now these are in scale of 1 to 24,000, which equals about 2.64 inches to the mile. Okay, and I thought these are some pretty big maps to piece all together his railroad network. So I was looking around on the internet, and I found the United States Geological Survey site, which had the old maps that covered a wider area and a smaller scale. So here is Roddis's line coming up from Park Falls, and it was about this point that the end of the Sioux Line built the track, and this was crossed over Highway FF, and it was known as Whiteside Crossing. Whiteside, there was a Mr. Whiteside that had a large farm and bred fine horses. So this Newell's camp, this was one of the first subcontractors that helped cut and provide timber for the sawmill. And any veneer grade logs that were to be found were put on Sioux Line railroad cars and made on a special train, and then this train would haul down to Marshfield to the veneer plant. Then the rest of the timber will obviously stayed at Park Falls. In 1920, Mr. Roddis passed away, and his son Hamilton Roddis, which is Sarah's grandfather, became the president of the company. And in 1925, they built the track over to the flambeau flowage, or what was before it was the flambeau flowage, and he got the contract to haul the fill materials for the dam for the turtle flambeau flowage. And he got $13,000 in compensation funds for his lands that were flooded as a result of the dam being built. And in 1925, he turned over all the woods cutting operations over to a Charles V. Nelson. And this explains why you have all these camps that are called Nelson's Camps. And this kind of arrangement went on till 1930, is when Hamilton Roddis then had his own crews go back in the woods and start cutting again. Roddis Lumber Company also had camps going west and over toward the one branch of the Chippewa River. And you could see all the camps are on the railroads except this camp here, which was Newell's camp number 2. It was way off the railroad, but it was connected by an ice road. Okay. And this is the northern extent of the Roddis Railroad system, along with the camps. And then it went off the sheet by about a half a mile. There was a couple spurs that ended up around Island Lake up in Ashland County. And this went on till about 1938, and they started using more and more trucks as more and more roads were getting built. And their last camp was Roddis Lumber Camp number 15-2. There was a Camp 15 before, but then they opened up another camp. And they had another railroad too. It was called the Dells Line that they bought after this Roddis line was finished up in about 1939. And that was owned by the Dells Pulp and Paper Company. And Roddis bought out that company and all their lands. And they had railroads built up and around to the top end of the old Roddis line. I looked up the maps for the Dells line, but there wasn't much information on there. I don't think Jim Cain got around to finding that area out. So that was another railroad anyway, and that ran till 1947, and that line was abandoned also. All right. And some of the equipment that Roddis had, this is their first engine number 1, along with a Cody jammer. And I think the Cody was able to slide along on the railroad cars too to load the logs. They had about a total of 10 different locomotives in the life of the Roddis Line Railroad. Okay. And out of these 10 locomotives, there were 2 locomotives like this style. This is called a Heisler locomotive. It was driven by 2 cylinders, which were in the center, and they were put in a V fashion. It's sort of like a V2 engine of a car, and it would drive this set of wheels and that set of wheels there. And one of the Heislers that they had was the engine number 10. That was the only brand new locomotive that was ever bought by the Roddis Lumber and Veneer Company. They also had 2 Lima Shea engines, and these were bought secondhand, and they were bought for more than the price of a car at the time. This was in about the 1920s. But these were very light engines. They stayed on the spurs and brought loaded cars to the main line, to a siding where the heavier engines would get on the main line and make the haul to Park Falls. But on this particular engine, the boiler was sort of offset to the left to facilitate the engine. This was 3 cylinders, and it would drive a drive shaft connected to the wheels. And they were very light, and they were very steady, and they were very slow going. There was a lot of power to them with this drive arrangement. And they were very dependable to work on steady and rickety tracks because the spurs were not built really tough. They were just built just enough to creep a carload of logs back to a sturdier built main line. So they had 2 of these, and those were eventually scrapped when the railroad was abandoned. This is their,
They call them, huh?
yeah, iron horses.
Iron horses?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. This is their engine number 2. And this photo is credited to Frankie Salonen, or Salonen if you're a Finlander. And he was a clerk on several of the camps, and he'd done a lot of photography for the for Harvey Houston's book called The Roddis Line. And he's done a lot of nice photography. Alrighty. This is one of the engine number 3s. There were 2 other ones called engine number 3 in the life of the railroad, and this particular one was nicknamed Old Kate. Okay. And the company bosses would get around from camp to camp using one of these old Chevrolet sedan to travel over the railroad, and they had brooms, you know, attached to the front to kick off the snow and other obstructions from the rails as they were traveling. Alrighty. And Russell, Roddis Lumber Company had several flat cars. Let's see, they had 82 Russell cars, and some of these were built by the Roddis crews, 18 flat cars, 1 caboose, 6 hog fuel cars that they hauled out sawdust and bark to build up grades over the soft swamps. And they had a couple gondola cars where they carried up coal to the different strategic points along the railroad for engines to keep up their supply. Now, Russell cars were pretty crude built. I mean, they were just, you could see, compared to a flat car and a Russell car was just a skeleton. But it served a pretty good purpose when the logs were being hauled back to the mill, that a lot of the dirt and the bark would fall off already. And the flat cars were usually used to haul the veneer logs down the Marshfield. And of course, a couple of flat cars were also used to haul people up on Sunday afternoons for blueberry picking parties, and they would put on hay bales and stuff in the railings, and the train would take up a bunch of people from town and go up in the north into the blueberry marshes and pick blueberries all day and have a picnic lunch and then come home. This was a common carrier railroad until about 1911, and Roddis managed to get his railroad to be a private railroad where he didn't have to pay the tariffs or anything, because it was actually his own railroad and hauling his own products. And it said in the statement to the ICC that he did haul passengers, but he never charged tickets for them at all. And that's where the passengers were at, was on these blueberry picking socials. Alrighty. And here's a couple of pictures of the steam equipment, steam shovels that were used in when Roddis had the contract to haul the fill material for the Turtle Flambeau Flowage Dam. And it didn't take very long for that dam to get built up. Alrighty. And here's a picture of Jim Cain. He passed away in about 1995, but he had 1,200 maps that he made of all the railroad corridors in Wisconsin, and his wife donated them to the Wisconsin Historical Society. And just recently, the whole collection is online now. You can go on the computer and search it out, and you can search out any map you want, and it will be there. The guy on the right was a former employee of the Roddis Lumber and Veneer Company. He was a top loader. His name was Art Labarge. But this was from the Harvey Houston's book. Okay, I think that's going to be the show.
Nice job.
Well, thank you.
Exactly.
Where was